Dean, and you're watching Dante's Boxing Nation.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So congratulations to Gary Russell Jr. He gets another very impressive second round knockout over a fighter who had never even been knocked down before. According to this fighter, Hyland, he said he had never even been close to hurt. And he gets savagely knocked out against Gary Russell Jr. Now, before I go any further with the whole truth, let me go ahead and warn you guys that I have some good news and I have some very, very bad news. Now, the bad news is going to be for the decafs, and the good news is going to be for the real boxing fans. Let's start with the bad news for the decafs. Decafs, the bad news is that coincidental list is a motherfucking problem. Oh, it's a problem. I don't know where to start. I don't know where to end. Now, before we get into Errol Spence and Gary Russell Jr., let's start with Al Haymon. This man, Al Haymon, he put on two, not one, but two explosive cards together on the same day on different channels. One of the cards was on free TV, which was the biggest one. Errol Spence versus Chris Algieri. You got Lucas Brown on the undercard and Steve Cunningham. All on free TV. Then you have the Gary Russell Jr. card on Showtime. When is the last time you guys have seen Golden Boy Promotions, Top Rank, Lou DiBella, any promoter put on two cards on the same day and both cards are extremely relevant? We're not talking about some LA Live card where it's a whole bunch of guys 6-0, maybe 10-1 that you've never heard of fighting against another guy you never heard of. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about top-notch fights put together on free TV or on Showtime, all in the same night. When has it ever been done? I don't believe it's ever been done. Not on this level. I mean, you guys remember when we had ESPN Friday Night Fights, right? We all know that 80 or 85% of those fights were very small name, irrelevant type of matchups. I mean, don't get me wrong. I guess I shouldn't say irrelevant. Let's just say they were more of fights that you would see at the bottom of a main event undercard or something like that. It wasn't something that you would usually see on Showtime or HBO. What Al Haymon has done in the sport of boxing, he removed ESPN Friday Night Fights and he replaced that with damn near 10 networks that he puts fights on, and out of those 10 networks, at least 8 of the 10 are fights that are so relevant, so significant, that these are fights that we could clearly watch on HBO or Showtime. This is what Al Haymon has done. Once again, 2 cards on the same day. One on NBC, one on Showtime. And both of these cards were way bigger than the average fights that we see on ESPN. You know how we talk about TV ratings and what kind of views these fights get? Well, you know, when it comes to a very impressive card on HBO, you're looking at like 1 million plus. That's when it's a real successful card, right? But depending on the network and depending on the fight, sometimes even 500,000 views can be successful. But with ESPN, they weren't even cracking numbers like 500. They were around the 200,000s and maybe even less. Okay? Once again, now you have Al Haymon that is bringing real fights to the boxing world. I told you guys already before, there have been some weeks where there were fights on, PBC fights, cards on, damn near every day. Damn near every day. Okay? So if you are a real boxing fan, that is the good news. The bad news is if you are a decaf, I feel sorry for you because Al Haymon keeps winning. And I know you hate it, but he just keeps winning no matter what. Okay? But that's not it. There's more bad news for the decafs. These fighters on the coincidental list are no damn joke. You have Errol Spence knocking out Chris Algieri in 5 rounds, knocking him down, 3 times, and knocking him out in 5 rounds. Something that fighters with far more experience, like Manny Pacquiao and Amir Khan, could not do. This is a problem for the decaf because, see, the decaf wants to be comfortable with their hate towards all the fighters on the coincidental list, right? They want to come up with these ridiculous ass excuses that don't make sense. And what's happening right now is they are running out of excuses for why they hate everyone on the damn coincidental list, right? Right now, and I know they're trying to come up with a meeting. I know they're saying to themselves, damn, we need to sit down and figure out what are we going to do. We keep making all these damn excuses why we don't like these men, why we don't like these people, right? On this damn coincidental list. We sit over here and we say we don't like Floyd because he's boring. We say, oh, I don't like Andre Ward because he's boring. He's this, because he doesn't get knockouts and et cetera, et cetera. But then when someone like Errol Spence comes along, Gary Russell Jr. comes along, and they're getting knockouts quicker than a lot of their favorite fighters are. Now these decafs have to do a roundtable, do a meeting, congregate, and try to come up with some other silly ass excuse why they can't stand these fighters on the coincidental list. They are running out of excuses, guys. Running out of excuses. Once again, you have Errol Spence knocking out name opponents. Okay? He's not just knocking out nobodies. He's knocking out name opponents that have never been knocked out before. The Rocky Siberian or the Siberian Rocky, he couldn't even knock out fucking Chris Algieri. Errol Spence was able to do it with ease. How do you guys explain that? Like I said, right now, they are scrambling, trying to figure out more excuses they can use, more code words they can use why they don't like Errol Spence. They're going to say some stupid shit. You know, oh, I know, guys. Let's just say it's because he's from Texas. You know, or we don't like the color that he wears when he fights. Or, oh, yeah, it's his accent. You know, what kind of guy comes in the ring with a Texas accent, right? You know, they're going to try to come up with some stupid ass shit that won't stick on the wall. They're going to try to throw as much shit on the wall and hopefully they can get something to stick. This is bad news for the decaf. Because realistically, the decaf is forced to give Errol Spence the same type of praise and credit that they were giving Golovkin when he was knocking out Adama, when he was knocking out Rubio. when he was knocking out Rosado or beating Rosado, right? They are forced to give these real American fighters the credit that they deserve. So that's the bad news for the decaf. They're going to have to regroup and really, really try to figure out new excuses for why they hate these cats. Just like they're going to have to keep coming up with more excuses for why they can't stand Al Haymon, Errol Spence, Gary Russell Jr., Deontay Wilder, Terrence Crawford, Keith Thurman. What do they all have in common besides the obvious? They are all knocking fighters out. Don't get me wrong, I know, what's his name, Keith Thurman, he hasn't knocked everyone out, but he goes in there for the knockout. But outside of Keith Thurman, all the other fighters, they are all getting knockouts. Great personalities. You have, what's his name, Errol Spence, extremely humble, has a southern accent, and he goes out there and he runs over name opponents. You decafs are running out of excuses. Not to suggest the excuses ever made sense in the first place, but you're just running out of excuses to use, period. So, the good news is boxing is in a good place right now, guys. With this Al Haymon movement, we are getting to see fights that we would have never seen before. We would have never seen Broner versus Porter if it wasn't for Al Haymon. Now you have Porter versus Thurman. And the winner of that fight will probably fight against Danny Garcia. We weren't getting fights like this before. Gary Russell just knocked out Hyland, and now Gary Russell is pushing for Lee Selby or Leo Santa Cruz or Carl Frampton. These are the fights that we are going to get to see, guys. And it is all because of Al Haymon. Al Haymon is trying to make the sport of boxing like the NBA, like the NFL. You constantly have fights every week, multiple fights every week. And on top of that, these fights are building up to something big, just like the season builds up to the playoffs and then to the Super Bowl, right? This is what we are beginning to see in the PBC series. So, Gary Russell looked very explosive. That right hook that he has is unbelievable. You know, it's comical when I hear commentators say, "Oh, where did this newfound power come from?" Man, have you even been watching Gary Russell? I was watching Gary Russell Jr. when he was fighting on the Spanish channel, when he was fighting on, them little small, Oscar De La Hoya cards or whatever. This man has always had a lightning type of right hook and a left hook. He's always been a complete fighter. Now all of a sudden, because he got 2 knockouts back to back, now they notice it. He was knocking out cats. Long time ago, he was knocking out cats. When he only had a couple fights, Gary Russell was knocking out cats. Okay? This is nothing new. This is nothing new. I'm going to tell you something. If you guys don't know how a fighter can reach the top of the coincidental list, I'm going to tell you how you do it. You become the biggest threat to the fighters on the Gaddy list. Right? To the fighters that have their hope insurance. You become the biggest threat to them, and you emerge as one of the top fighters on the coincidental list. See, deep down, I believe a lot of boxing fans, they already assume that Gary Russell would beat Lee Selby and he would beat Leo Santa Cruz. And this is what makes Gary Russell a huge threat. This is what elicits the hate. And this is why I say, for the decafs, it's all bad news. because the coincidentalist is coming. That's all I got. I'm on to the next one.